I'm like, are you okay with me driving this thing? He's like, yes, I am. I trust you. And so I'm like, cool. So we start that thing back up. And the first thing I do is grind that gear. And I was like, oh man, I'm like, he's like, no, it's okay. I felt a little life leave his body, but it was cool.
Welcome to the This Train podcast, where we'll talk about all things in the making of This Train, the movie. Today's special guest is Ed Paul Fry, star and producer of the film. My name is Jack Lugar. I'm the writer and director of This Train, and I'll be your host. All right, let's talk about production.
Yeah.
And those 2 weeks. So starting on July 9th, we show up and record. I'm trying to remember what we recorded at Park Place Church, I think was our first location.
That was our first location. Before that, though, we did do a test shot. And it did make the film, if you recall.
Oh, yeah. We went out to Jackrabbit.
Collective Roots. Remember that one? Just walk up?
Yeah, we reshot that one, though.
Yeah, okay.
But we did go over to Jackrabbit at night.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
And do it with the red lights and the flashing lights and so forth. So, yeah, we did. John and I, of course, went out a few times chasing trains, trying to find what that might look like. And sat on some tracks for a couple hours waiting. But yeah, we did go. We did go to Collective Roots one day because we were going to do something else, and then something didn't pan out. I can't remember what. Oh, it was the truck.
Oh, that's right.
We were going to use the truck.
We had a different vehicle. That was the Ricky Mobile. Right.
And so we were going up there to shoot some driving shots, I think, with it. We were just going to get you driving around and. Well,
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the vehicle, because that is iconic, and that does play a character. The vehicle is very much a character in this, and we kind of knew that because that's something that Ricky was known for, not only for as the former Rust Belt rock star that kind of fell apart, but everybody knew his vehicle.
Right.
It's when he drove through town. And so we had to have something kind of iconic there.
Right. My Subaru wasn't going to work.
It was just not going to happen. I had it. Yeah. So I had an Acadia at the time. I didn't know what I was driving, but but it had to be something kind of, so we found a 38 GM truck.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. And it's a cool looking.
It's a cool truck.
It's a cool truck.
Yeah.
And so I asked my friend, like, can we use this? And he was just so, oh man, yeah, you bet. I know he's been putting this thing together, working on this thing forever, and it's his baby. And but it just wouldn't run when it needed to.
Right.
It was every bit of a 1938 Chevy truck. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a nightmare if it wasn't going to start up when we needed it to.
Exactly.
So yeah, because I have the still shot.
But we have some cool shots.
Yeah. Well, there's some great kind of publicity shots with you in the truck and sitting in the back and so forth. And then I also have a shot of us pushing the truck out of the street.
Exactly. So, but Ricky looked cool driving it. Everybody would have known that.
Right.
I mean, that was an iconic thing.
Yeah.
But then you come across this other one.
Yeah. So there was like 2 weeks beforehand, and actually I remember, I think we talked on the phone. I'm driving out to Illinois to see my daughter. And it's kind of that conversation, we can't use the truck. And I'm like, oh, crap. So then I start kind of spitballing in my mind about who do I know that has a rock star worthy car, right? And it didn't feel like it could be just a new hot car, right? Mercedes or even a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, because that didn't seem like that character to me.
Right.
It needed to be earthy and historic, and it just... so then you're like, who do I know? And I called a student I knew who had I'm trying to think what he had.
We had an 83 Fiero lined up.
He had a Pontiac of some sort, but it was a muscle car.
Yeah.
I called him. I said, hey, I know you got this muscle car, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, yeah, I got stolen. I'm like,
oh, man.
Okay. He says, I'm close to maybe getting another one, but I don't have it yet. I don't know if I'll have it in the time. I said, well, keep me updated. And so, I was talking to Elizabeth, my wife, and I said, do you know, I mean, do anybody anything? And so she sent an email out to everybody at Century 21 Sheets, which was where our real estate company was at, and just said, we're looking for a classic car that's worthy of a rock star, kind of something like that. And Jim Rendacy emailed right back and said he had the car, which was I think it's Malibu Blue. Is that right? Malibu Blue Chevelle, 1969.
69 Chevelle. Yeah.
And
Four on the floor.
Yeah. And so I set up a call with him to tell him what we were doing and when we would need it. And he was like, yeah, let's do that. I'll do that. That's awesome. So the tough part was that part of my mindset, I was like, oh well, we'll just use the car on 1 or 2 days and just do the drive up shot and this shot and that shot. Well, just to set the scenes right, it wasn't going to work that way.
Yeah.
So we needed him over those 15 days. I think we needed him 5 days, plus then we added a couple pickup shot days that he came up but Jim's been so wonderful, right? That's his baby.
Oh.
It does not go out in the rain.
Oh, yeah.
So we're like, no rain, please. No rain, please. And until you and previous owners, but once Jim owned it, no one touches that car.
Yes. I couldn't believe it. I got in for the first time. So we went out for a quick drive in it the first time. And so he took me around, kind of showed me what it could do. He's like, no, you can drive a clutch. You can drive a foot, I'm like, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be fine, all of that stuff. So we get down the road about a mile, and he's like, well, take it. I'm like, are you serious? He said, well, you're going to have to drive it anyway. And I said, so that's just part of it. But I'm like, okay. So he slides over to the passenger side. I get out, and I get into the driver's side, and I'm sitting there, and I look at Jim, and he goes, huh. I'm like, you all right? He said, I've never been in the passenger side before. I'm like, are you okay with me driving this thing? He's like, yes, I am. I trust you. And so I'm like, cool. So we start that thing back up, and the first thing I do is grind that gear. I was like, oh man, I'm like, he's like, no, it's okay. I felt a little life leave his body, but it was cool. So we drove it back into Dave's, where we're shooting for the first time. But that was just fun. By the end of I wouldn't even back that car up. I just knew I would just be like, car wrangler, it's yours. Take the keys, back it up.
You would drive it forward into the
Exactly.
scene. Stop it, right? When we get the scene, Jim would hop in, drive it backwards.
But after 3 or 4 days, he suddenly he was just like throwing me the keys, like, go, have fun. I'm like, what a sweet, it was very sweet, and him to be so trusting with that, and that, because that thing is Jerry. It's a beautiful beast.
Yeah. I think he's I want to say he's the third owner.
Yeah.
But it always until he brought it here to Indiana, it always lived in California.
Yep.
So it still has the California plates, which and in the film they do, and I thought that's perfect.
That's
right?
very cool.
I mean,
where's Ricky been?
Ricky would he would have a place in California that and that seemed to make sense to me. It was I could write that story basically.
Yeah.
So that car, again, it's like the actor for Tyler. We will solve this problem, and it'll a lot of times maybe work out even better. I mean, either vehicle would have been perfectly fine. But Jim has been so great since the shooting, right? He brought it up to the premiere at Paramount, parked it out front, hired his own security to be out there so he could come and watch the film. At all the car shows he takes it to, he has a big poster with the film poster. And so he talks not only about his car, but he talks about the movie This Train and tells them when it's coming. So that's just been it was a godsend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Opportunity to have that vehicle. So that came together nicely. So our first day of shooting was the men's group in the basement of Park Place Church. And they let us use their basement, which was a huge space. We didn't need all that space, but it allowed us to spread out. And first day of shooting, I don't know if that was the easiest scene to shoot. It was literally 4 or 5 different scenes that we were doing in that day, and we had 6 guys who are our extras, our men's group.
Of extras that were just wrangled from casting.
Yeah, that was one where I posted. I think I posted that one on Indiana Film Network on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I had some guys. 2 guys were semi-pro wrestlers that like to do that stuff, and one guy came down from South Bend.
This guy from Cincinnati.
Came, right? So it was just kind of this thing. But that was, we just had them. I was like, just bring 3 or 4 different pair of clothes. You guys are in a men's group that has, you've been halfway house or formerly incarcerated, whatever it may be. So they were good. I look at some of the shots and I go, a more experienced director would have figured that shot out a little bit better, right? It was our first day. We were just trying to get the process going.
Right.
All things considered, it went pretty smoothly. We were a little behind by the end of the day, but that was where the first tragedy struck, which was we were probably 2/3 of the way through the day, maybe more than that. And Roger, our sound guy, goes, I think the Zoom mixer would not turn off.
Oh, wow.
He's like, it won't turn off. And we're like, what do you mean? He's like, it's not stopping, right? But something's not going right. And I'm like, well, after a while, we're like, well, just pull the battery out or whatever, right? I mean, you got to shut it down. He shuts it down and powers it back up. And there's nothing on the SD card.
Wow.
All the audio is fried. We're like, well, maybe it will. Maybe if we get it into post, we can find it, right? I'll find an expert on SD cards. Zoom mixers, I'm sure that company will.
Right. They've got to have
They'll have a solution, right? This is not possible. So we put a different SD card in, put that one in my folder, put another SD card in, and finished recording the scene we were doing. And then we had one more scene in the hallway to do. So on that storyline of the Zoom mixer, we knew we had the recording of the audio for the last 2 scenes, or part of the last scene for sure. We then went to Dave's auto service in the morning the next day, and we were shooting all outside. And then we went, shot inside in the auto bays, the second part. At the end of shooting all outside, Roger goes, something's wrong with the Zoom mixer.
Oh, wow.
And he says it won't shut off. We're like, well, this sounds familiar. And he so we're like, well, shut it down, whatever you got to do, right? And so he shuts it down, and of course, no files. Put a new SD card in, and we record the inside the bay stuff, and so it worked again.
Yeah.
Right. When I got into post-production, we dumped off every day. We were dumping off all the footage and audio. At least the audio, maybe twice a day we did it. It just depended. But my daughter Callie was our first AD and our continuity person. She was in charge of the files of footage, but she wasn't there for the first 2 days of shooting. Okay. So I can't remember. Maybe I was doing that part or whatever. So the audio that we shot inside on the second day worked, but we lost all the audio files from the exterior of the auto shop. Oof. Didn't matter that much.
I think put this way out of my mind.
No, yeah, you remember this? Oh, this was, yeah. But there were only a few lines said on the exteriors because a lot of times it was you driving up
right,
and hopping in the car or hopping out of the car. So we ended up having to ADR all the men's group inside stuff, except for that one scene, and all the auto stuff outside, which, thanks to all the Anderson mufflers and so forth, anyways, we probably would have had to do it anyway. Yeah. That the auto stuff. But anyway, so the first 2 days, that Zoom mixer got fired. Not our sound mixer. Right. Roger was with us the whole time, and he did a great job. But the Zoom, it was something gone. Was corrupt. We returned that to Zoom, and they sent us a new one. But we had to go to a different audio, and we had a different Zoom mixer that we used.
Okay.
So anyway, that was that
I
first day.
put that way out of my. I probably remember there were issues, but I was over in the corner trying to still memorize lines, and telling myself I suck. So,
Well, that's probably good. You didn't know that some of that was going on,
Yeah.
maybe too, or it wasn't bothering you, because that could throw a whole production off in some senses, right? And maybe it's not being naive enough, or just feeling like, well, we'll solve that problem later. We can't. This is what filmmaking is. There's a podcast, Indie Film Hustle, and one of the questions he always asks his guests is, when was the day on set when everything it was the nightmare of nightmare and everything blew up, right? Yeah. And so I was kind of, I'm always expecting that anyways, and that was one of those moments. And, when I think about that, what were the days when everything blew up? And we got rained out one day. Just torrential downpour, but
I do remember that day. Yeah.
I think which led to you having to get a different car.
Yes,
because you got.
I got. It was a torrential downpour.
Yeah.
I mean, 4 inches in the course of 20 minutes or how. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And I drove through a puddle that ended up being something Jacques Cousteau couldn't find me in. So yeah,
that was a film in itself.
Yeah, I was like, thank goodness we're off today.
Yeah.
So
that's
and and I will say this, because I'm stuck wherever it is I am, and I can't get so Ricky called his dad.
Yeah.
I call Rollin.
Yeah. To come help.
I'm like, hey, I need a ride, buddy. So I said, this is funny because Ricky's calling Dad right now,
right,
to get bailed out. But here we are. So
yeah, that was quite the moment. But that was the only. I think we had rain one other day, but it went away. It was like through and gone. It didn't stop us from shooting. So we only lost that one day, which did add. We had to pick up a scene that we had to cut that day at a later point. But for the most part, we just kept chugging along. So unfortunately, it wasn't. I mean, most days were probably in the 80s. They weren't 90-degree days. We weren't just sweltering death. So all those kind of things, shooting in July in Indiana, worked out pretty well in that sense. So we that was, I think, we did pretty good at staying on schedule. There was one day out at the farm, and I watched this shot all the time and go, man, I wish we'd had more time, because we did it in a one take kind of thing where you're driving up and Reggie and Roland walk out to you, and it's that first meeting, and it never quite had the impact that I want it to have.
Right.
It just staging wise.
There was the long hug.
Yeah.
I remember.
The hug's a little too long, right? If we could have done it again. Like, the hug's too long.
Yeah.
I would have gotten Roland positioned a little differently to where the camera ended up.
Right.
You know what? That being said, I'm the one who notices for the most part. I mean, and again, it was a one take, so I had nothing else to cut to.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Which is a lesson to be learned, which I knew the lesson, but even so, I'm like, we can do this, and we were running out of time in daylight, and we still ran out of time. We had to come back and do another scene later, I think, because of it. But yeah, that was one of those moments. But overall, I mean, there were never any.
I do remember that barn scene. When we were shooting that day, it was warm, because it was warm in the barn. We had to turn the big fans off in the barn, of course.
Right.
You have the horses and everything, but we weren't even thinking. We had some lemonade there. Have some lemonade.
Yeah.
Have a spot of lemonade. Yeah. We all kept drinking our lemonade, and then suddenly realized we don't have any lemonade left.
Right.
So it's just like, stop drinking the lemonade, guys. So we'll get you a Capri Sun.
Right.
So.
Well, that's always, of course, why we should have brought more lemonade. I mean, that's always the thing, which I always tell my students about the first film I worked on, and there was a scene where the actor's cutting watermelons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the props guy was not, I guess, totally savvy about, how many takes might happen.
Yeah.
And so my job as the PA was, Jack, go buy more watermelons, right? Because they'd cut through the two that they'd bought, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, we need more watermelons. I'm like, how many? as many as you can carry,
I
right, or
don't
whatever
know,
you can get
as
up
many
this
as
hill.
Gallagher needs for a
Right.
show. Yeah.
Exactly. He has a total tour bus just for the watermelons, right? Yeah. So, yeah, that I mean, overall though, I think that I mean, we had the disaster. This was afterwards where we got halfway through shooting and realized the actor was in the wrong shirt.
Yeah.
And
I think that was one of. I did that one time. We luckily had a ish shirt.
yes, your shirt I think ended up in the truck that got flooded and disappeared there.
It disappeared. Yeah.
And I think Roland had a shirt that close enough matched.
Close enough match, and we were able to work around that with wardrobe. But yes,
that was one. Yeah, I always tell my students, I think if I were to do this again, I would just abscond with all my actors' clothes. So then it's all on me, or because we didn't have a wardrobe person, so we would take a picture and say, "This is your wardrobe."
Well, I was in charge of my own wardrobe. I mean, that was in several outfits, several different. In your, you would send me those pictures daily, and I would have to hold up, scene whatever this is,
right? Yeah, we were holding up fingers. This is for what day? I think we were doing days, right?
Yeah.
This outfit you were wearing on this day, which meant we had to go reshoot a scene because we ended up flipping it we flipped the order, and so we reshot it so that we had a different outfit on for that one.
And I'm an idiot, and I'm just like, I'm not thinking much about it because you usually have somebody take care of that for you if you're in theaters. But I've got different hats, different shirts, and a couple of pair of different shoes. I'm just thinking, well, Ricky would be doing this, and
right?
Let's talk about the sunglasses.
As I say, the damn sunglasses.
The damn sunglasses. Let's talk about those. Well, in Ricky's defense, Ricky's a rock star.
Yeah.
Man, and he's just kind of like, he's got there was still, I always thought with that character, I'm like, and there's still a tinge of that ego left, even though so much is gone. There's still a tinge of that ego left. I mean, and part of that, I thought it could be the rings, it could be he's just still kind of have that Elvis swagger about him in some way, and so I just thought sunglasses is just a way to portray that. I was the idiot who brought along, well, I'll just use 15 different pair. And but that's a whole other level,
right?
So
that was and
the reflective.
John, our DP was constantly, he did camera operation too. Obviously, he would go, okay, got to take the sunglasses off. So then we were always constantly going, okay, when are you gonna, at this moment, before you look over here, you can take the sunglasses off so you can look over at a certain direction.
I had to be very cognizant about when we were pulling those things.
And then we got caught a couple times where there's, and no one has ever said anything to me. If I point it out to them, they go, oh, right. Yeah, where it goes.
But we can do that with a Tarantino film. I mean, if we really dig into it. But
it happens on where they've got somebody who's paid a lot of money to be a script coordinator and to watch for continuity, and and we're asking Callie to do continuity and 3 other jobs at the same time, and so, it was there.
And taking Jimmy John orders at the same time,
So, all the stuff that you have to do because everybody's pulling 3 different jobs at the same time, and so those sunglasses kind of would rear their ugly head occasionally where you're like, oh, how do I edit around that one? But
I'm sure that's not what was said. But
well, what I said was solve the problem.
Okay, well we'll go with that.
No, it was. I think there are 2 scenes really where I was about to pull my hair out, but thank heaven for 4K shooting, because 4K allowed me to crop in a couple times where I could really just kind of remove it from the close up to some extent, and at least so that it wasn't prominent in the shot, and that ideally you don't have any of those extra things, but you're trying to capture reality, right, in the character, and so there's a scene where your character runs up without a hat on, and then there's another shot where the hat's on the ground, and you didn't come with the hat, right? Nobody's ever seen it. And I didn't see it until I think the third time I watched it in the theaters.
I have no idea.
Right. Yeah.
You'll have to point it out.
Yeah.
To us someday.
I'm not going to say it here, so people aren't looking for it. But I mean, there's just things like that. And I was in editing room a stickler for continuity of movement. Right.
Yeah.
If you're moving your head this way or you're doing that, can I match it? I really would like to match it. And then I was watching a scene from Whiplash, where the couple is eating pizza and there was no concern for continuity. They were, you go from her with the soda straw in her mouth drinking to the 2-shot, right, with her putting pizza in her mouth, right? It's like it's not like that. It was just like story preempts continuity in some senses, and if your audience is compelled enough by the characters and what they're talking about, they don't see that stuff, or they're willing to forgive that stuff. That's kind of the what I've learned over time, or at least I tell myself that.
Yeah. Yep.
To make myself feel better, if nothing else.
No, I think you're exactly right.
But there's no way to avoid a mistake or two. Right. And hopefully you got enough coverage that will help you hide most of it, which I felt like we did, which allowed me to solve the problems. So yeah, that was a fun one. But yeah, to ask your actors to manage their wardrobes, I mean, it's an independent film thing to do, but I mean, if you could, right, because all my actors, other than a few things that I bought, had to supply their own clothes.
Yeah,
I bought a few shirts to match for Tyler, but he still brought some of his own stuff. First day on the set, he spilled a Coke on it. I said, "Well, that'll work."
Yeah,
yep, something like that. Those kind of things that it's just the way it works.
Yeah.
With regard to locations, we had one challenge with Collective Roots where I'd kind of scheduled to shoot on a Saturday and Sunday, I believe, or maybe it was even Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And I was in there kind of scouting location and kind of making notes, and I talked to Anna there, and she's like, "Oh, I scheduled a tea party for the afternoon on Saturday."
That's right.
And it's actually with a colleague of mine, and I was like, "Rrr." but I was like, okay, I think we can make this work. And so I think we worked out to be able to come on Friday afternoon. And actually it worked out nicely because we came Friday afternoon after shooting Friday morning someplace. We came Friday afternoon, shot some stuff, and then we were able to just store all our equipment there.
It worked out.
So that we came in Saturday morning, shot some stuff, got out of there so that they could do their tea party on Saturday afternoon, and then came back on Sunday and finished up there with a full day of shooting. And we closed it down quite late that night in the dark.
It's once again, it goes back to that beautiful hospitality of people. Just they wanted to help. They thought this is very cool, and it was they offered up because of the ask itself, and that was a cool thing. And I think just because some good relationships and everything else, but still not knowing what this was, and to the depths of what this is going to look like. And which is to their credit, I'm just like, this is going to be very invasive and intrusive, and this can be overwhelming, and this could take a lot of time. I need you to know that up front. Okay, that's fine. You've got a camcorder, right? You're just going to be running in here. Sure, why not?
Little do they know. Little do they know. But the space worked out really nice for what we were doing, and that was. Of course, when I wrote the script, I had no idea. I kind of had in my mind the Toast was a location I had in my mind as I was writing it, but I didn't know anybody there, and I didn't know if that was going to work or not. And you pitched going to Collective Roots, and it kind of really fit a nice atmosphere. And
it fit the vibe of what I thought, Suzanne would have, taken the money of whatever it is and just said, this is what I've invested in.
Right.
It's this cute little boutique.
So that worked out nice. I'm trying to think.
Usual Suspects. We found that place.
Yep. Because we were going to try to go to a different place, which is kind of in upheaval, and Usual Suspects worked out. Those are scenes also that if I could reshoot those. One of the most stressful things for me as director was I was also kind of the extra coordinator, and so extras would come in. I'm middle directing. I go, hey, come on in, right? And so I was trying to be a greeter as well as trying to direct whatever we're working on, and then if I could do some of that over again, I would.
Yeah.
I would go back and I would have set up camera angles so that we could make that space feel more full. I mean, it was full, but then the angles I had used, I couldn't use some of those shots. The cutaways I grabbed of people, they were obvious people in other shots that I had to use. I was like, oh, that doesn't work.
Right.
There was just all these little things. We were throwing our crew into seats and filling in. So if I could redo it, I would redo that. That is one of the scenes. Those scenes I would redo.
Right.
But for what they are and the type of film we were shooting, I mean, we worked with what we had.
And I say, but and also just big shout outs to all of those people, from Collective Roots, Usual Suspects, New Ownership Now, but local pub here in Anderson. Just Jackrabbit Coffee. Josh and Sharon were just fantastic.
Yeah, great supports
about lending that to us. Even during it's kind of business hours for them. So they were incredibly helpful with that. So
so we used. I mean that was I thought Jackrabbit was a great place for us to shoot because it was kind of where we first met.
Where we met.
And we have a second meeting, I guess, officially, but where we sat down and got to know each other, and it's just a piece of Anderson. We're talking about production, and let's talk about trains. We didn't have to do anything with planes. We do have trains, and we did have one automobile.
We did have to deal with planes, though.
Yeah, I guess yeah.
That is part, yeah.
Planes and some birds.
Yes.
The timing of planes. You don't really realize certain flight patterns until you need to shoot a movie.
Exactly.
And they always seem to fly right over your set.
And doing aerial acrobatics and everything. I don't know what they were doing there, but it was, that was quite funny. I think we were shut down for a good hour, just waiting for some planes to stop doing what they were doing.
Yeah,
so
they were doing some practice.
They did not realize that it was a closed set.
Right.
So
I always recollect when I was, again, on my first movie as a production assistant, and we were shooting outside, and they said, Jack, there's a guy mowing his lawn down there, a block down there. Go ask him to stop. And I was like, ask him to stop?
Yeah.
Okay. I ran down there. I go, we're shooting a movie. And he was like, no problem. I was like, it's that easy. But again, it was Seymour, Indiana. So, again, if it was L.A., they'd be like, how much you paying me?
Exactly.
But we did a lot of, as I say, chasing trains, although it was really not, it was just waiting on trains.
Yeah. Which now I know, there is an actual schedule.
Okay.
And I've met the guy who actually in town knows the schedule. He came to came to the screening at the Paramount. He said, you just could have called me. I said, I had no idea that you were the one who knows the schedule. He said, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been nice to know because we just assumed they just kept showing up at a certain time. I mean, we did, because before we started shooting, John, our DP, John Williams, and then Roger and Hannah would come, and we were out there with the camera. Part of it was to practice setting the camera up and tearing it down and kind of seeing how fast we could do it, because that was part of the efficiency. But also we're like, well, let's get some train shots in advance, right? We can get the trains approaching and we can get trains moving by without having actors in those shots that we needed. And so John and I went out one day, probably about 2 weeks before production, in an area, Daleville area, maybe a little further north, somewhere. And we went out to the train track and parked the car, and then we hiked, I don't know, it was a couple hundred yards down the track, I guess, to get out a little more rural.
Yeah.
Set up on the track, and I said, okay, you watch that way, I'll watch this way. And this was one of those 90-degree days. We just stood out there. And we stood out there. We were out there for an hour and a half.
Wow.
And not a single train came by. And we're like, how is this possible? We hear trains go by all the time. So we're like, you know what? Let's try someplace else. So we packed up, and then this is when we ended up out by the Anderson Memorial Cemetery.
Yeah.
The train tracks, where we did a lot of shooting, and they were very kind to let us kind of park in their area, and then and use that train tracks behind behind the cemetery. And so we went there, and I think we did catch a train coming by that afternoon. And so we're like, okay, let's come back here. And so that first time was just John and me, but then Roger and Hannah and myself, we all went out there like another day. Train came by, we got some shots, still just kind of trying to figure out how to capture shots of trains coming by. So it was good that we did this. And then we sat there for 2 hours, and not a single train came by. And 2 hours, you're like, that's not even possible in Anderson that 2 hours would go by. But then we're like, we are really screwed.
I mean, that was the whole impetus for background for this story was you get stuck behind trains in Anderson. That's all that you do is sit and wait on trains.
Yeah, so, trains are a part of the Anderson culture,
for
at least my perspective, and driving through and getting stopped. And everybody always had this alternate pattern. They'd see the lights flashing. Oh, there's the train. I'm going this U-turn.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got another way to go. And but so
we know where the viaducts are here in Anderson. You know,
And I learned them after a while. Like, I'm following that guy. He looks like he knows where he's going. So I was concerned. Oh, we're going to get to production, and we need a train to come by when we're shooting this, and we can't. We got to get to the next location. And I'll tell you what. During those 15 days of production, every time we needed a train, it showed up. Did. It was so uncanny in some senses that one time the train went by. I'm like, we need to get another shot of that. Didn't quite, we need to try this again or whatever. And Thomas, who played Tyler, he goes, well, can you just call the guy to send another? Something like that. And I looked at him and I was like, God bless you that you think I have control over this. I said, I have no idea when they're coming.
I love that.
Right. And it was like, it was just a great moment because I was like, things had been going smooth enough that it looked like we knew what was going on. But then you remember the morning where we shot the cemetery scene in 2 different cemeteries.
Yes.
So we could have the train tracks behind you in the one shot. And so we went out there, and this was our last morning, actually last shooting day with Julia. And we went out to the cemetery, and we set up, and I was like, well, we're going to just shoot the shots of you, Ed, over Julia's shoulder and whatever, and hope that when we hear a train coming, we'll scramble to get ready for it. Well, literally, we're still blocking, and I'm like, you'll stand here, and Julia, you'll stand here, and the train whistle happens. We're like, it's coming!
I hear that train coming.
Right? And so instead, we're like, John, set the camera up over there. This is what we want to frame. And I was quickly, here's where I need you guys to walk to and sit down. We had 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes when you hear the train in the distance coming from the horn. And the train was coming from the correct direction. I don't know that it mattered, but it was the direction I had envisioned.
Yep.
Coming from the south going north, or at least that's as I picture south going north, kind of.
Yeah.
Something of that direction. And because we had you walk to the spot to sit down, and then the train would come through shortly after you sat down. And we did it. The train was coming. I had you guys walk. You sat down. The train rolled right through.
It did.
It was all perfect timing.
Just perfect timing. It was crazy.
And we're like, I think we got it. But okay, let's go ahead and set up this other shot. We hear a train whistle. Here it comes again. Okay. And so we scrambled. But I don't think we'd moved anything. Maybe we had, but we went back.
Yep.
Did it again, shot it again. Train came by, perfect timing. I'm like, okay, all right, I think we got it. Let's go shoot within another 10 minutes or whatever, another train came by. So in 20-minute span, we had 3 trains come by to get that one shot so that we then did your shot, and we were 2 hours ahead of schedule.
That was great.
We were like, we have never been ahead of schedule. And
that was Julia's first time at the track, so she just thought, "Wow, this is just perfect."
Right. She had no
so this
clue
goes easy, right?
These trains, we just and so that and I recollect then because after we were done shooting, we needed a shot. It's the opening shot of the film where underneath the train we see you driving the Chevelle into town, basically.
Right.
And so we had Jim bring up the Chevelle, and we had to coordinate this so that we would be the first car. as the train's going by, and so we had positioned the Chevelle and then and Jim was actually driving your car behind it, and we kind of had you I think sitting in the median, so that we could time it for once we heard a train coming for you just to kind of pull up there.
Pulled right in and got it ready.
But we didn't want to have you pull out too soon and block traffic before the gates go down. One of those kind of things we were trying to balance and try to be good citizens. And who cares?
Who cares?
No, so we were trying to be nice about it.
We're filmmakers. We're guerrilla filmmakers, Jay.
We're more like chimpanzees, maybe. Not quite gorilla. But, no, it was another one of those moments, right? We got everything staged, right?
Yeah.
And the greatest fear was that as we were showing up, the train would be coming by, and we'd be like, "Crap, that's the train we needed," and we have to wait an hour or something. But we got the camera set, we got the cars positioned, and so you guys just kind of parked them over there, and we were all kind of sitting around the camera on the tracks talking. And Jim says, "So what? Now we just wait?" Because he
didn't know. Yeah,
I looked at him and I said, "Yeah,
that's pretty much it."
I had told him it could take a couple hours. I don't know if I was very clear about how, why.
Right.
But he was like, "Okay."
Yeah, we had trail mix. We're good.
But then within 10 minutes of that question, we heard the train whistle, and so you guys scrambled back to the cars. And we kind of were like, "Okay, let this car go by you." And so you let a couple cars go through, and then we're like, "Okay, pull out there and just." And you guys pulled out, and I don't know if there was any traffic coming at that moment, but and it just worked out nicely. We were able to position the camera so that we could see the full car under there. The gates, it all kind of positioned nicely. That was when I was writing the script. I had this opening shot that wasn't realistic in how it looks, but between that vision and what I talked to John about in his pitch on why don't we shoot under the train, because my picture was shooting between the trains, right? So between the cars there's a gap, and we would see you between that, but it's not really a big enough gap. In your mind, and you're creating, you just think, "Oh, this is what it looks like," right? Until you go out there and look at it.
We could have slowed it down.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So John pitched shooting under, and there were.
It's a cool opening scene.
Yeah, there's some really.
Just,
it's a nice shot, and so that was one of those times again where we didn't have to wait. I don't think more than 10 to 15 minutes for that train to show up after we got set up.
Right.
So those are the little miracles that I truly, some divine intervention was happening as we were creating this film.
Everything was just, I love the word serendipitous. It just, things happened when they needed to happen.
Yeah.
So.
I'm trying to think what else during production that might have gone on. I did my best not to feed everybody pizza every day. So we had...
you did well on that. We did Jimmy John's. We had some Taco Bell.
We did Wingstop.
We did, yeah.
You found your new love of Big Boys sliders or something.
Big Boy sliders. Yep. Big Boy sliders are great. So.
But yeah, we tried to mix it up, but that was always in the morning, right? We're shooting for an hour or so, and then somebody would say, "What are we doing for lunch?" And I'd be like,
I didn't think that far ahead.
Right.
Right.
So we were always kind of trying to order lunch while we're trying to shoot something.
Director, craft services, everything. We're doing it all. So.
Yeah, it was definitely a team effort that way. Thank you for listening to this episode of This Train, the podcast. Join us again next time when Ed and I talk about post-production, festivals, and distribution. Until then, take care.